Right, thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us, both online and in person. And thank you very much for the invitation to come in and talk about the research that we've done. So it's great to be here. Thank you. Let me very quickly just say, so I am Heather, and this is Karina, and we're both in the economics department at Queen's Business School. So let me just point it at the right direction. Let me just start by setting the context for this in terms of policy. One of the most pressing work-family issues that parents face today is combining work, being employed, and raising kids. We've seen over the last 50 years, we've seen an increase in female labour market participation. But what that's then done is create a tension between work, combining work with family. We can define parental leave as gender-neutral, job-protected leave from employment. But very simply, the whole point of parental leave is to give parents in the first months after having a child time at home so they can combine work but have time home with the child. Parental leave policies are now very common. Certainly in Europe, as part of the EU, all EU countries have them. But despite the fact that they're very common, despite the fact that they're high on the policy agenda, as yet, we don't really have a clear consensus around how parents respond to them and the effect that they have on parents' labour market outcomes like wages and employment. The immediate policy context for this, and the reason why we did this piece of research, it was research that was done for the Northern Ireland Department for the Economy. So the policy context that this sits within is DFE's 10x economy strategy. They have a strategy that by 2030, they want to make the Northern Irish economy more innovative, more inclusive, and more sustainable. Where this particular project fits into that agenda really is in that particular area around female economic inactivity. If you compare Northern Ireland to, for example, the rest of the UK, Northern Ireland has higher female economic inactivity and lower employment rates for women. So we come out worse in those areas, female employment participation compared to the rest of the UK. So that's the immediate policy context. There'll be a fair bit about policy as we go through this. Project aims, so essentially what are we trying to do? What we're trying to do is look at the impact of parental leave policies on labour market outcomes for men and for women. And we wanted to primarily think about the relationship between parental leave policies and what are the really important kind of demographic characteristics, job characteristics, personal characteristics. So that was an overarching research aim. But to help us answer that question, we then broke that down into a couple of separate ones. So we've got 4 main questions that we asked ourselves. And what we'll do today is really just go through how we answer those questions. The first question there is really just who is more likely to take leave. Okay, if you think about that from a policy point of view, you have a parental leave policy. You're going to want to target it. Who is more likely to actually take up the leave that is there? So the first question is really, can we identify particular personal and job characteristics that make it more likely that someone will take parental leave? Second question is got to do with, we'll see as we go through this, that one of the key issues in the parental leave debate is duration of leave, because the length of how long parental leave lasts. Okay, that's really key in the literature. So the second question is really just that, who is more likely to take longer leave? Can we identify particular personal characteristics or job characteristics that make people more likely to extend and take longer parental leave away from work? The third question is, what influences mothers' employment status after leave? Certainly in the UK, one of the main coping strategies that parents, particularly mothers, use to combine work and family is working part-time. Okay, we are in a country whereby there is no universal, affordable, or even free childcare. Okay, so that's an issue. So one of the main strategies that women will use is they'll go part-time. They have a child, they work full-time, they have a child, they have leave, and then they go part-time. So the third question is really that, can we identify, what makes a mother more likely to switch to part-time after having a child when she did work full-time before having a child? Okay. And then the fourth question then is really just, does taking parental leave then have an impact, particularly on wages? The literature talks about a wage penalty. So do parents do they get hit with the wage penalty if they take time out of the labour market to look after a child? So those are the four questions that we set ourselves to try and answer. At the outset, it's important to keep in mind that parental leave policies sit within a wider policy and social context. Okay, and certainly there is a whole kind of suite of what we would call family policies that are aimed to help parents combine both employment and having kids. The other thing that it's really important to remember with parental leave is that parental leave policies can have different objectives. So they're very common and many countries have them, but not all countries have them for the same reason. Now that's really important because the objective of your policy will then inform how you design it. And how you design it then informs the effect that it actually has. So if you think about parental leave, we can think of kind of three main reasons for why countries might want to have a parental leave policy. The first one, the historical motivation for maternity leave, is around maternal and baby health and child development. So to allow the mother and the child to have time together after birth for the bonding, for child development, to get better maternal health outcomes and baby outcomes. That's one of the main reasons for having maternity leave, and it's still today one of the main justifications for mandating leave. Okay. The second reason or motivation for having a parental leave policy is fertility issues. Countries that have problems around low fertility, we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but if you have low fertility rates that are potentially leading to the ageing population problems, having policies like parental leave that allows women to stay in employment for economic reasons, but also have kids, then parental leave sits within that space of policies that allows people to combine work and family. And that's really important for countries that have low fertility rates. And then the third one is the one that we were primarily interested in this project, which is the labour market aspect, the implications of parental leave. So this is really I suppose, the more economic motivation is if you want to encourage labour market participation, if you want more women to work and be in employment, you have to have policies that will facilitate women to be in employment and have a family. Okay, but then thinking about the implications of that for them in terms of the labour market outcomes. Now, just to go back to what I said about the importance of policy. So, for example, if you wanted to have a parental leave policy for the first reason there, because you're primarily interested in child development and health outcomes, the literature fairly clearly says that what you should do then is design your policy to have long leave, because the longer leave, the more time you have for the mother to be with the child for better health outcomes and better child development. Okay, so that would kind of say have a longer leave. But if you're having a parental leave policy for the third reason, well, actually the literature very clearly will tell you that having long leave is a really bad idea. If you want to get women to combine work and having a family, you want to have the leave short. So for policymakers, what's absolutely crucial here is what's the point of your policy? How do you design it? Because that's directly going to affect the outcomes that you have. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why you don't see one size fits all. It's why countries have different policies, they designed them in different ways, and then you see the literature on the effects being mixed. Okay, so got too far. Let me go way back. There we go. I'll figure this out by the time we're finished. There we go. Okay, so from an economic point of view, if we think about this coming from economic theory, we can think of parental leave having both positive and negative effects on the labour market outcomes of parents. And when I talk about the labour market outcomes of parents, I really just mean employment and wages, okay? Working and what you get paid for working. So this slide is thinking through why might parental leave have a positive effect on parents' wages and employment. A couple of things to say. The first one now is just the labour supply story. So the fact that there is parental leave, if people who are thinking that we want to have a family, if they know that parental leave is there and they have the opportunity to take leave when they have a family, that increases their likelihood of working now. So you can increase labour supply now by actually saying you've got the opportunity to take leave when you have a kid. If you don't have parental leave, then they'll say, well, I'm just not going to work because I know I'm going to be taking time out of the labour market. So one argument is you can increase labour supply of prospective parents because they know they've got the option when they have children. One of the main positive arguments around parental leave in terms of labour market is the labour market attachment argument. There's different aspects to parental leave, but most parental leave policies will have some kind of job protection or job continuity thing in there where you're protected from being dismissed. But also a lot of parental leave policies will actually say, certainly in the UK, that a woman should be able to come back into either the same job or an equivalent job with their employer. So you've got job protection and you've got job security. Now, what the job security does is it increases labour market attachment. It increases the likelihood that a woman will return to work after taking leave. And not only does it increase the likelihood that they will return, but also the evidence says quite often also it increases how quickly they come back. So you can increase return to work and you can get women to come back faster if you've got job continuity or job security. So that's one of the main reasons why parental leave can have positive effects around employment and participation, because you're giving them job protection and job security. So higher rates of return back into the labour market, potentially faster rates of return back into the labour market. And if more women are coming back and they're coming back faster, then if they're out of work for less time, then the loss that they will suffer from being out is going to be reduced. So from I suppose from a labour economics point of view, the argument here will be around human capital, your skills, your qualifications. If you're out of the labour market for a long time, your skills will depreciate. There'll be a loss of your skills and your human capital. Okay. But if through job protection and job continuity, you can get more women to return to work and return faster to work, then that penalty will be lower. There'll be a loss in their human capital. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah, happy enough with that argument? Mm-hmm. Okay. So for those reasons, getting prospective parents being more likely to work, women more likely to come back into the labour market, more likely to come back faster, and suffering a lower penalty because they are coming back in and coming back in faster, we would think there would be predicted positive effects on employment, labour market participation, and career development, mostly for mothers. Very, very clear. The penalty here is mostly for mothers and not for fathers. Any questions on that slide? Are you happy enough with that one? Okay. However, the next one. For all of those potential positive effects, we can also think of there being negative ones as well. Parental leave, like any leave from work, is essentially an artificial career interruption. You're taking time out from not just work, but for many people, there's actually an upward trajectory in terms of your career. And it still is the case that motherhood coincides with those really important years for career development. So just as your career is taking off and you're investing in your upward trajectory, you're taking time out of the labour market. So parental leave is essentially an artificial interruption to your career. What's that going to do? Now, this is where the length of leave is really, really important. The longer the leave, the literature is fairly consistent on this. When you take longer leave, that reduces the likelihood of women coming back. So you lower the probability that people will actually come back and start working again. So if you reduce the probability of returning to work, that's then either women leaving the labour market, they're just going out, they're not coming back, or they're potentially coming back slower. So if you're taking longer leave, your career interruption is longer. So you are therefore going to see a reduction in your human capital. There's going to be a depreciation of your skills from when you were in work. So lower human capital through that loss, lower productivity. Those two will then combine. If women are coming back in after a long period of time, they've been out for a while, their skills have depreciated, they're less productive, then they're going to take a hit on their wages. There'll be a wage penalty for women coming back after a long period of time. And then with less human capital, less productivity, lower wages, women have almost then gone on to a different trajectory. That career trajectory has been permanently altered. And so there's going to be less advancement, less chance for career development. The reduction in the hours of work, that we talked about that a little bit there a minute ago about in terms of switching to part-time work. So it's not just that women will stop working after leave, what we would call like the extensive margin of labour supply, that's whether you work or whether you don't. But actually some women will adjust what we would call the intensive margin of labour supply, which is the number of hours that they work. So women may, as a coping strategy, have to work less. So they'll maybe go part-time or they'll reduce their hours of work. Now, again, if you're reducing your hours of work or you're going part-time, that penalty that women suffer is actually going to be bigger. Your opportunities for promotion and progression and advancement are probably going to be different if you're working part-time relative if you're working full-time. And you're also on lower wages anyway. So you're reducing your earnings capacity, you're reducing your opportunities for advancement and training and career advancement. And if you're working less and your wages are lower, well, then actually over your life cycle, you're contributing less to your pension. So you get to retirement age and women who are potentially on a lower career trajectory than they would have been and are working less and have lower wages, well, there's a pension hit potentially coming your way, okay? And then the last point there is more sort of from the point of view of how employers view this. So if women take time out of the labour market, that may be interpreted, there's a signaling effect there. Firms may interpret that as lower career commitment. And so if you've got a lower career commitment because you're taking time out to have kids, well then, okay, maybe there's less training opportunities, less promotion opportunities, less things coming your way. And so there's a signaling effect there whereby employers may actually just not give the same opportunities around women in terms of the career development because they're saying, well, so potential negative effects. So look, overall, over the last two slides, how parental leave affects labour market outcomes is ambiguous. There's reason to think it might have a positive effect, but there's also reason to think that it might have a negative one as well. And that's why the literature is really mixed on this. There is no consensus in terms of what the literature says. Absolutely crucial in all of that is the length of the leave. So all those negative effects that primarily mothers will face, they're bigger when the length of leave is longer. Okay, so the wage penalty, the hit you take on your career advancement, that's all going to be a bigger penalty if you're taking a longer leave. Okay, happy enough with that? Any questions on that?
No.
Okay, well, no one's happy with it.
Yeah, but yes, you explained it very well.
Am I pointing? Do you want to take over? Lovely. Okay, keep going. So in terms of, so this research was done for Northern Ireland, Department of the Economy. So the main policy context that this research was sitting in is the European context. Okay, America is very, very different. They've got very, very different in terms of the family policy. So we're kind of sitting within the policy context of Europe. And in terms of where the policy debate is in Europe, it's not about whether we should have leave. That argument has been and won. There is absolutely kind of now, it is part of, you know, if you're an EU country, you have to have it. The main debate, the main discussion in Europe is really around is the duration, is whether leave should be long or whether it should be short. That's kind of where all of the research and the debate is still sitting, is designing policy, what is the optimal length of policy leave. In terms of where the economic literature is on this, most of the literature really just looks at specific countries and does like a specific country, what happened, you know, this country brought in the policy or this country changed the policy, what happened. So that's largely where the literature is. When it comes to how parental leave impacts upon employment and participation, as I said, the consensus, we don't really have a consensus. That's very, very mixed. But one thing that the literature does agree on, there is a fairly clear consistency, consensus across the literature that there is a wage penalty. For mothers who take parental leave, there is a negative effect on the wages. That's the one thing that most of the literature across most of the countries does agree on. And particularly if you've got longer leave, that's an even bigger wage penalty. And if you go from being full-time to part-time after having a child, that's also a bigger penalty. So the wage penalty will depend on how long you take leave for and what you do after leave, whether you come back full-time or part-time. Okay, most of this I've probably already chatted around. Yes, I have. So just the third point there again, just to say the absolute importance in this debate around what is the objective of your policy, how that links to how you design it, because how you design the policy, particularly around length and generosity, that's what's going to determine whether you have positive or negative effects, which then has implications on gender inequality and the gender pay gap. So if women end up on a lower trajectory because of what leave has done to you, they're taking longer leave out, there's a bigger penalty, then clearly gender inequality is going to increase and the gender pay gap is going to increase. So that all kind of feeds into that. Parental leave is complex. There's no easy answers. If there were, I wouldn't be sitting here chatting to you today because we'd have the problem all solved. Thank you. Okay, what did we do? The 4 questions that I put up, we're going to try and answer those 4 questions. The data that we use to do that is a data set called Understanding Society, which is just another name for what is the UK Household Longitudinal Survey. Okay, it is, for the UK, it is probably the best. It is the largest kind of panel data set. Now, what we mean by that is it's a survey that tracks the same individuals over time. So it will continually go back and track and interview the same people. So you can build up kind of like a profile of people over time. So it was Understanding Society. Fantastic benefit, it's free. The other benefit is that it is a large nationally representative panel data set. Now, for economists and social scientists, that's fantastic. If you can get a good panel data set, that's really good. It was really good for us because it's got a whole lot of really interesting questions and information around personal characteristics, household characteristics, job characteristics, and it also asks about maternity leave and paternity leave. The one thing that we really wanted to do that we couldn't do, and hopefully we will be able to go back and do this later on, is up until this year. So the latest wave of Understanding Society, which came out just there in November, it does have information on shared parental leave, but before that it didn't. So we couldn't, with the data that we had, we couldn't go in there and ask interesting questions around shared parental leave because the data just didn't allow us to do that. But hopefully that's something that us or someone else can do in the future. So methodology. So we're going to answer those 4 questions. The first question that we set out to ask is just who is more likely to take? Who is more likely to take parental leave? I'm not going to go into given that we've probably got a sort of a mixed audience, but we'll not go into the technicalities too much. But what we're just trying to do is use fairly straightforward regression analysis to answer that question of who is more likely to take leave. Okay? Does that equation mean anything to anyone? No, we'll skip over it. Okay, just keep going. Second question is who's more likely to take leave? Okay, so again, we're looking here at can we identify the personal characteristics, the job characteristics that make someone more likely to take longer leave. So we're just modelling the length, what determines the length of leave that someone takes. And then just secondly, the other thing that we're interested here in terms of the length of the leave is in the UK, there's a certain period, there's 39 weeks that are paid. You are allowed to take parental leave, maternity leave after that, but it's unpaid. So the other thing that we're interested in doing is actually, can we think about can we see who is more likely to extend leave beyond paid leave and take unpaid leave? Okay. Third question that is just what influences mother's employment status after leave? Here we're just trying to model and see what is it that affects a woman moving from being full-time employed before leave to part-time after leave. So who's more likely to switch to part-time employment? And then the last one, just a straightforward, what we would call a wage equation, where we're looking at all the things that affect someone's wages, but particularly what impact does taking leave have on the wages of a parent. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Karina.
Right. No, it's okay. Can I sit here? Yeah, I can sit. I think I'm fine. So key findings I'm going to talk in a minute. Just want to say one small thing is that we intended to do this analysis for Northern Ireland only. We couldn't because of the very low numbers whenever we tried to look at all these 4 questions. So actually this analysis is UK level. Okay. So first question that Heather mentioned was last probability of taking leave. Try to make it as intuitive as possible. So pretty much it's very clear that women are more likely to take leave, which is not a big surprise. then woman, after a certain age, so older woman, 45 plus, is less likely to take leave, mainly because probably fertility rates are dropping and everything else. Obviously being married is very important in a decision to take leave, because you probably have financial stability that the partner offers to stay home with a child. Higher educated woman, obviously is taking leave, more likely to take leave. And not surprisingly, people working in government, central and local government and health sectors. So public sectors compared with private sectors are more likely to take leave. There's higher protection for leave in the sectors compared with the private ones. You can move on. On the same note, we also looked at whenever we talk about earnings, like wages. So higher earners are more likely to take leave, especially. And I just realized looking at the slide now that this is not 40,000, that's 4,000. Would have been lovely. So people earning more than 4,000 a month are more likely to take leave in this context. The second question that we've asked is the probability of taking leave by gender. Married men, it's a high probability of taking leave. The coefficient is absolutely huge, it's 1.5 more. It's very, very big compared with woman, married woman. I think this is completely intuitive, why married men are taking more leave. Also being employed in higher earnings, men are more likely to take leave because they are already in a job security type of position. They offer the stability of the position that they're in. They're more likely to take the time off. For women, it's pretty much no effect. If you are married, you're more likely to take leave, but pretty much you are forced into taking leave. Less likely to take leave if you are 45 years of age.
So that is an interesting thing that I didn't expect, that pay matters for men,
But not for women.
but it doesn't for women. So it doesn't matter what women get paid. It doesn't affect whether they're likely to take leave or not, but it does matter for men.
So it's pretty much kind of a forced type of, you know, you are a bit in the situation. It doesn't matter how educated are you, what to pay, which sector you are working in, you will take leave compared to the men in our society at the moment.
Okay, up to me now.
Duration of leave, so this, what we looked at is pretty much only for the woman's perspective. So as Sandra was saying, we have leave of 39 weeks, which is paid leave, and after 39 until 52 weeks, you can take unpaid leave, so you get nothing. And obviously, women are taking longer leaves. Married women, again, for the same point of view that we have offered the security of a stable income from your partner, are more likely to take leave, and higher pay decreases actually the ratio of leave. So the more you earn as a woman, the less likely is to take longer leave. You are more likely to return to work faster than going to that. It is pretty much the opportunity cost that we're talking about, that I'm talking about. Just pretty much you can't afford to stay home on a very low or no pay after 39 weeks. There's also so that's pretty much the unpaid leave for one married woman, and higher pay increases the likelihood of unpaid leave.
Yeah, so I also find that interesting, and I'm probably a little bit surprised the first time I saw it. So women, who's more likely to extend leave beyond? It's actually those who get paid most who are less likely to do that. They're more likely to go back faster and not extend their leave, even though they've got higher pay and probably more financial ability to do that.
Is that related to the men as well? Like men are more likely to earn more. So it's the pay thing that's driving it, not the gender.
Yes, yeah. So for men, so the literature for men, the way they try to interpret how pay works for men is that when a man more likely to be willing to take leave, because actually be willing to take leave is probably different for men and women. Men face different issues around workplace culture and cultural norms depending on where they work. So there's men who still work in places who don't feel like they can ask for leave, or maybe don't want to take leave because of the implications that but the way the literature would explain that is that men are more likely to be willing to take leave when they reach a point of sort of career stability. So when they've been working for a while, they've had progression, they've had higher pay, they've got their promotions and their salary increases. It's then when they get that career stability that they're more likely to take pay. And so that's kind of the way that we're interpreting, only the highest earners in men, it's only the highest earners who are more likely to take leave, because they probably got to that point where they know it's not going to be a hit on their career, or it's not going to send a negative signaling effect to their employer. So they're actually more willing to say, I'm taking leave, and they take it. Because there are still a lot of men who face cultural norms in the workplace that says you shouldn't be taking leave. For women, in terms of pay, well, women who are higher paid are more likely to be the ones who are higher skilled, higher educated. So they're the ones, if they take longer leave, they're the ones who are going to lose more of the human capital. So they're the ones who are going to take the hit because they're out of the workforce, their skills are depreciating, their human capital is depreciating. So they've got the incentive to get back quicker. So they're not losing. Do you see? Is that, yeah?
Is there anything to be said though about women who make more, maybe more white collar jobs that return sooner because their workplaces have structures that allow for that, whereas women on lower pay, maybe working shift work or maybe in the hospitality sector, that there's no, they don't have that freedom of, I can choose, maybe work at home, where I can choose, a bit more of a flexible option, and that might elongate then their maternity leave and then restrict them from returning to work.
That's a really good point. One of the other things that we would love to have done, but we couldn't do with the data, is look around flexible working.
Yeah, we can't actually answer that question. I would like to say that we are assuming that can happen, and that is kind of hidden in the data. But what definitely we can say is that women that earn 4,000 or more, they can afford to return to work. They have higher education, but they can afford to pay for the childcare.
Yes,
so that's something that is really directly
back to work because they have to afford the childcare, and they'd be working for nothing.
and I've probably lost. I've lost up-to-date knowledge, but there was a point in time where about 2/3 of women were actually just paying for childcare. There was nothing left after their entire salary went on
And if you're
childcare.
married, that's fine, not fine, that's, you can handle that.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
You've got some another income coming in, but if you're on your own or,
Sorry.
No, you're fine. No, that's fine.
I'm happy.
Oh, you should go. Okay. No. Okay, so part-time employment is common strategy, parent scope. So yeah, we were just modeling what makes someone more likely to go from full-time to part-time employment after they've had a child and after they've taken leave. Again, the results here are not that, what you'd expect. Women are still more likely to do that than men. Now, we still live, the UK and Northern Ireland still fits much more within what we would kind of call the male breadwinner model, okay? Some countries, if you look at most Scandinavian countries, they're much more, they kind of move towards what we call a dual earner family model. But Northern Ireland, the UK is still very much in that if there are child caring responsibilities, primarily it's the women. So women are much more likely to go part-time. Older women are less likely to go part-time. Now, again, we can probably speculate there and just argue that that is a woman who have got to the point where they've had some career progression and they've got some stability and they've built up a better ability to go back with former employers in a position like what they left. Okay. Interesting results for pay here. So I have to remember how to explain this one. Lower earners are more likely to switch than lowest earners. Higher earners are less. So this is, I think this is a childcare story. So if you look at pay, the lowest earners, they're less likely to go part-time, and that's probably just because of financial need. They're on low pay, both parents have to work, so they have to stay full-time employed. If you then go up the earnings distribution a little bit, those who are kind of more in the middle, they're the ones where the one parent is more likely to go full-time. So potentially they can afford that, financially can afford for one parent to go part-time, but they're probably not earning enough to pay for childcare to allow both to go back full-time. Then you go up to the highest earners, they're less likely to go part-time because they've got the financial needs to pay for childcare and both parents work full-time. So it's the ones in the middle who can afford to allow one parent to go part-time but can't afford childcare. They're the ones who are more likely to switch to part-time. It's not the lowest earners who can't afford it, and it's not the highest earners because they can just afford to put their kids in childcare.
The numbers that support that is that the middle earners that you're talking about is the one that earn between 500 and 2,000 a month. So it's kind of the childcare cost, which is about 900 per child or something like that a month. So it's kind of, it fits it very well into that story. Unfortunately, we can't actually see that because we don't have childcare costs in the data at all, but it goes towards
Yeah.
supporting that.
But essentially, the going part-time is a coping strategy. It's not the lowest earners. It's not the highest earners. It's the ones in the middle. Okay. Okay, and then the last thing is how parental leave affects wages.
Yeah, okay. So, so, we're interested to see if you take leave, will that have an effect? Will have a wage penalty on your salary? So we can see that we have a positive effect on taking leave for both men and women. And that was initially a little bit strange, thinking that, women will get a wage penalty at some point, taking time off work, and as Heather was saying, longer time of work will have a penalty on human capital and the depreciation of skills and so on and so forth. But we couldn't see any effect, so we just looked at the woman only and we said, right, let's see if we just can analyze the wage equation and see if there is a penalty on that. And as you can see from the results, there is absolutely no penalty on the wage of taking leave. Now, the question is, how much leave will induce a penalty? And if you can just look at as we were saying earlier, to start taking a longer leave, so 39 or more weeks, you can actually see that the duration is crucial for determining the wages of women. And you can see that the wages are actually dropping, so they're earning less. There's a wage penalty on taking leave, which is kind of fit with the rest of the literature.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. So for what we've looked at for the UK and Northern Ireland, the wage penalty kicks in at that 39 weeks. Yeah. So if you take paid leave up to 39 weeks, there doesn't seem to be any wage penalty for mothers who are doing that. The wage penalty is kicking in for the mothers who then extend their leave beyond the 39 weeks into the unpaid category. That's where we start to see a negative effect on the wages. So it does fit in with what I've been saying quite a lot through this in terms of the literature pointing towards the length. The length of your leave is really important in terms of whether you suffer a penalty and how much, and you get a greater penalty the longer the leave period. Okay. So substantial wage penalty. Now, I suppose in terms of how to interpret that, because as I said, when you're looking at the literature, we can think about how leave can have positive and negative effects. And the positive effects of parental leave are labour market attachment. You're increasing the attachment the woman has to the workplace through job protection. They can come back to the same employer and a job that's equivalent to where they were before leave. So there are benefits from that labour market attachment. But what our results seem to suggest in terms of the wage penalty is that the penalty from being time out and the human capital depreciation and the loss that you get from that negative effect is bigger and outweighs any positive effect you may have from labour market attachment. So that the wage penalty seems to suggest that the negatives are outweighing the positives. So any positive you have from attaching women to the labour market, that's going to be outweighed by the fact that she's getting a negative wage penalty.
Sorry,
yeah.
At what point do you measure the wage penalty of the earnings after leave?
Do you mean time?
Yeah.
So taking time off.
From the point
of giving birth to the point of taking leave more than 39 weeks.
No, but when did you measure earnings?
We measure earnings when they're coming back into the labor force. Coming back.
Right. Okay.
So when they come back
So
after
when they
leave.
come back after the 52 weeks. for example.
Okay, but not at like a year long or 2 years long.
No, we haven't went further than.
So there's
Moment of
initial leave.
Yes,
it's
okay,
initial wage
that's
penalty.
fair. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, that's fine. The literature does suggest though that it is, even though we haven't measured it over a longer period of time,
Yeah.
the literature is fairly clear that it tends to be it tends to be a permanent one.
Obviously over time, the problem that we have is again, small numbers, because we follow a certain number of women that actually take more than 36 weeks. You'll be surprised to find out that there are not so many women taking more than 39 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So our sample is smaller if you continue to further up, but we can try, it's just that the results are not as robust.
That's an interesting question, actually. That's something we probably could do. I think that's okay. That I think is where this is. Yeah, we're just coming to the end. So just to finish off, to probably just recap on on what we did and why we did it. So in terms of why this is interesting, it was motivated from the Department of the Economy's 10X strategy for the Northern Ireland economy. So the very specific kind of immediate policy context that this research was fitting into was that vision for 2030 of making the Northern Ireland economy more innovative, inclusive and sustainability. And again, in terms of lower economic inactivity, lower employment rates for women in Northern Ireland, parental leave could be one out of numerous. It could be one policy tool that is used to try and facilitate or help women to do both, to be able to combine employment and having children. Okay. The second one, which I mentioned, we've gone. I don't know what I did. I can only apologise for that. We go back to the last slide there. I am a liability when it comes to those things. The second policy context just kind of fits in with what I mentioned a little bit earlier on. More broadly speaking, many countries, the UK including many European countries, are now facing, we're going to get there, keep going, lovely, okay. The demographic shifts that we've been seeing taking place in a lot of countries, and particularly in European countries. If you could actually just click on, you see the little link there? Okay, this is just a picture to say a lot quicker what I could say in words. Okay, the demographic shifts that the UK have seen is since about the 1960s, we've seen a very, very big decline in fertility in the UK. So if you look at that peak, that's the early 60s. And between the early 60s and the mid 70s, fertility rates just absolutely went through the floor and they've never really recovered. So fertility rate in the UK at the minute is around about 1.7. Now, the replacement rate in the UK is 2.1. What that means is 2.1, that's what you would need for the UK population to replace itself from one generation after the next. And if your fertility rate is below the replacement rate, then you're not replacing your population from one generation to the next. So the UK, if you could go back to the last one, thank you so much. So the UK, oh no, back up. The UK is, with falling fertility, with all of that's happening, again, policies that are going to enable people to work, to be employed for all the economic reasons we want people to work, but to be able to have children at the same time to try and get fertility rates back up again. Again, parental leave fits within that policy context of potentially helping us to have work-family policies that enable households to combine both work and having family, because we need to have kids to get, for fertility reasons. So that is it. We will finish there, and happy to take any questions, suggestions you would like.